Hello, and in today's iOS development quick tip, we're going to take a quick look at customizing the editing items context menu within your app. So, what am I talking about? Well, I've got the simulator open here, and I've just got some basic text here, and it's this menu that contains, when I select some text, contains cut, copy, lookup, and share. Well, I can add actions to that fire off actions in my application, so that's what we're going to take a look at today. We can also remove actions from that, which in certain circumstances, which is something we're also going to look at. So how does this work? Well, there's one instance of a class UIMenuController in your application. It's and it controls what shows up in this menu here. It takes objects of the class UIMenuItem. So we create objects of that class and then add them into the menu that already exists. It uses the target action mechanism where we define that a certain object hangs a target on itself and says, okay, I can respond to actions from this these type of events. But it's slightly different in the sense that instead of hanging a target, it uses the responder chain, which basically means we say, okay, we want to call this method, but we don't specify where we're calling it. It dynamically works that out itself by basically starting off with the most specific controller where it's currently initialized and going up the tree until it finds somewhere where our method is implemented. So this singleton is actually a subclass of the UI responder object. So that's the object we're interacting with to do our things. This is an Objective-C kind of paradigm. It doesn't have native support in Swift. When you use selectors, as they're called, which is a way of wrapping method names, when you use selectors in Objective-C, it's basically bridging to Swift. So that's kind of the background. But let's dive into actually doing it. So I've got my simple UI view controller here, and that is our method will be found if we put it in there, because UI view controller is a distant child of UI responder, so therefore it's in the responder chain. Here is the method that I want to invoke when I click my button, click my custom menu button. It's just going to print test out to the screen. Now, why have I got this IB action declaration here, or attribute more appropriately? Well, it's to do with that Objective-C history I talked about earlier. Essentially, to make this function visible and usable in Objective-C, we have to either declare @objc or @IB action, because it's not Swift methods that aren't visible by default, but because we're basically essentially using Objective-C to do this, it has to be visible to Objective-C. So without further ado, let's create our custom menu item. So I'm just going to, because this is a demo, I'm not going to spend loads of time on naming. I want it to execute nice and early, so in my view did load, I'm just going to create my item, and I'm going to say let item equal an instance of the UI menu item class, and that class only really has one initializer, which takes a title. So I'm just going to say test here, as well as an action. Now that is a selector. Now selector is a type in Swift, but it's not a native Swift concept really. So we don't typically define these selectors just using the standard selector API. There's a macro that we use in Objective-C that checks that it's type safe, and then converts it to a Swift selector that Swift can understand. So to signify that it's a little bit different to other Swift things, and it's a kind of legacy support, we use this special syntax which is # selector, and then when we open parentheses and then close parentheses, in here we're given access to all the methods that are exposable to Objective-C, so we can just type the name of a method, which in my case I called mine post message. Now, it's kind of old school, but why do we have this target action API in Objective-C and Swift? Well, it's because if we just passed the method name just by default, the compiler wouldn't know how to distinguish between you want the method to be called and you want just a representation of the method, so you can tell me that that's the one you want to call when this thing happens. So differentiating those two things is to avoid confusing the compiler, essentially. But anyway, we've created our menu item, so now we need to add it to the one and only instance of the UIMenuController class. So I'm going to say UIMenuController .shared, and then there's an array on it, which is menu items, which allows us to add and remove custom items from the menu. So I'm just going to say menu items equals an array, because I'm only adding one item, equals an array which contains a new item. Now if I run that, and we select some text, we now have this test option here, and if I click that, we see we do indeed get test down in the console, and that's the behavior we defined. But you might be asking, why have I got two fields here? Well, that's to demonstrate the fact that if I add them to the field by default, it's not, our new button's not contextually aware. It doesn't know when to display and when not. So fortunately, we can use another override method of in the UI responder object that's called CanPerformAction to define when these options show up and when they don't. Whenever you're overriding a method like this, you always want to do what the superclass would have done by default, because we don't want them for any other fields that the menu is contextually aware, like for copy and paste, for example. So we don't want to obliterate that. So what we're going to start off by doing is returning whatever the super class's implementation of this method is. So I'm just going to pass whatever action it is up the chain. Sorry, yeah, I typed the wrong method. CanPerformAction, and we just want to pass it back the action that was passed to us with the sender which was passed to us. So we've kind of covered our backs, protected against overriding stuff that we do want to override. But what about the one we want to override for a test action? Well, we get the selector that was passed to us here, so we know that if this item, when this function is called, is equal to test, or sorry, is equal to post something, then we know that it's our test item, because that's what action we define for it. So I can say if action this selector that we found here. We don't want to do the default implementation, we want to do something different. So we know that this method wants to return us a bool. Can I, whatever this action is, can I perform that action or not? So if the action is that selector, we need to know in what circumstances can you perform this action, and what circumstances can you not. Well, we need to return. We need to do some logic here to find out in what circumstances can we show this test item, and what circumstances we can't. Well, I want to only show the item when the text area is active, just as an example. And there's a bool on a text area that says is first responder, which basically means is it currently active. So and the system will change that to yes or no based on whether it's currently active or not. So whether we can display this field is just going to be equal to whatever the value is of asking if the body is first responder. Now if I run that, compile. So if I select in the top, in the title field, the body is not going to be first responder, so we shouldn't get a custom item, which we don't, we just get paste. But if I select in text in the text area, we do see a custom item. So that was an example of how to implement the kind of context menu and do it dynamically based on certain arbitrary conditions. So hope you've enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you liked it. Drop a like as well, that's really helpful. And yeah, subscribe for more iOS development videos soon. Thanks for watching.